Hello and welcome to At One with Animals, Conversations to Inspire. I'm Janine Uppheim, and these conversations are in collaboration with Animaltalk Africa and in support of the Global White Line Protection Trust. Their website addresses are in the description of this video. My guest today is Melissa Engerman, who lives in Baltimore, Maryland, in the United States. She has been communicating with animals for as long as she can remember. It was completely natural to her from the moment she began communicating on any level. And she works at the Maryland SPCA, a shelter for dogs and cats in the Baltimore area. So a lot of our conversation is about how someone as sensitive as her can cope with working in an environment which is, most often emotionally draining, but at the same time really needs people like her who are so in tune with the animals, open to their wishes and their needs, and also how she has shared her wisdom with her colleagues and beyond. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with Melissa about her life, how she got to actually work in this shelter, and she really changed my view of what a shelter is actually like and what it has the potential to be like. As she shares with us in the conversation, their shelter runs solely on grants and donations. So I have put the website address to the shelter, to Maryland SPCA, in the description of this video, and I know that she would be very grateful for your donations. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been really looking forward to talking with you.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So I'd really like to start in the beginning, which is where I like to start with everybody. But I just want to say that you grew up communicating with animals, that to you that was natural and that was normal. So can you share the first time you actually remember that experience?
I mean, that would kind of be like asking me the first time I remember communicating to a person. It just was. I didn't know any different. Didn't know that that wasn't what everyone was doing, because it just was. I know as a little child, and I can't remember the age, I had a cat named Squeaker. She was my first real kind of soul connected pet that I had. And she was the one that I communicated with when I was having a sad day, or didn't get what I wanted when I asked for that like second cookie or something like that. But also, I mean, she just knew to come to me whenever I needed. And she was my best friend. I mean, she was just always there for me. And just, I mean, growing up, I just really didn't know any different. I would communicate to the, animals outside, the birds or whatever, and just didn't know any different. I mean, for the most part, it was the emotion, getting, what was going on with them emotion-wise. Me just trying to tell them everything was okay. The child, everything's wonderful. But I couldn't really say a first time. It just was always.
Yeah. Wow. And do you remember, did you talk to anybody about it, like your parents or your siblings, anyone?
I don't know that I talked to them about that. I mean, everyone knew that I had a special connection with animals. but I also at the same time was talking with spirit and talking, with the trees and with everything. And so that was more what became conversation. That was Sandy. Became more conversation. That's what became more conversation. Was about me having conversations with the spirits in the house. Because actually, I remember this is one memory I have as a little child, is excitedly going to tell my mom that the house taught me how to tie my shoes, because in my mind, the spirits in the house were the house. And so that was discussed, because that was kind of a like, how ridiculous of you kind of a thing. And even to this day, I get laughed at from the family about different things with that. But as far as the animals, I don't think I really saw it as anything. There was never a time where I had to share like it wasn't necessarily conversations. It was just like feelings and pictures I had. So there was never a time that I really needed to share or felt like I had something to share. So I don't think that really came up until like later when I was older. And when I say older, I'm talking about probably like in my 20s, like low 20s, that it really came out. And then it probably was like kind of like, oh, come on. That's just one of those things again with you. At least for my family. I mean, with my friends, when I would say something like, you might want to have that back left leg checked out. Something's going on with your dog's back leg. And, their response would be, oh, how did you know he was limping, or something like that. So I had friends who definitely saw that there was something real to what I was saying.
When did you realize that what you had the ability to do wasn't actually something other people were doing?
Probably in my 20s, when I was talking to people more. And then I heard about like animal communication as if that was a separate thing. And that's, I think, when I started looking at it more deeply, or started like being like, oh, let me see what I can actually do with this, and started like reaching out to connect with an animal, like, my friends' animals or something like that. But also at that time, as people would hear about it, they would say like, oh, can you check in with my pet and see like, why aren't they eating anymore? Why are they limping? Or like actually a dog who I had adopted at one point, she passed a few years ago, but she was diabetic, and I was friends with her foster mom, and she was telling me she was having a really hard time when Layla first started having insulin shots. Layla would fight it, and she just did not. She really hated it. It was a miserable thing. And my friend, who, as I said, was fostering her, was just having a really hard time with this, just emotionally, but also like it was just really draining for her. So she asked me to communicate to her. Actually, I think this is how we became friends, because she reached out on social media. Does anyone know how to communicate to dogs? And someone connected us together. So I had a communication with Layla, explaining to her why it was needed and all of that. And after that, I was told that she had no problems with it. And that's how I connected with this friend, and then fell in love with this dog, and Layla became mine. And she was totally fine getting the insulin. And but I think that was actually even my first time really confirming, even though I had friends who were like, oh, how did you know my dog was limping, or something like that. But that was like an extreme, like, wow, went from a dog who would like fight having their insulin done twice a day to a dog who would sit and accept it and no problems. The only difference being my communication with her. And that was when I really was like, okay, this is something.
It's such a gift to be able to just, sometimes it's just as simple as clearing the air, explaining why something is happening. And yeah, it is those times when you can't deny that it's real.
Yeah, exactly. So even as simple, and I think this is something I tell my friends when they're going away and they're sad that they're leaving their pet at, a boarding facility, or they have someone, watching their pet or something like that, and they have to leave, and they feel like, sad leaving their pet behind. I tell them, like, envision, like, talk to your pet and envision to them each day by the sun, like, how many sunsets, sunrises are there going to be, and let them know at that point they'll be home again. And I have friends who say that, like, they've started doing that, and they're like, I don't know if it's helping, but it makes me feel better. And I'm like, in my mind, I don't say it out loud, but I'm just like, no, it's helping. They understand. Like, that's helping them.
Yeah. It reminds me, when I moved to Norway, I brought one of my dogs with me, and he was 9.5 at the time, and he'd had some issues, some health issues, and we also rehomed this young dog. And so sometimes I would have to take Oliver out without Zach, the older dog. And every time I took Oliver out, because they were both big dogs. One was a standard poodle, the other one was a Briard crossed Irish setter. So they're both big dogs. I couldn't take them at the same time. So I used to take Oliver out, and the whole time Zach would bark. He would look out the lounge room window and just bark, watching us go down. And then we'd come back and he'd be barking. So I don't know if he was barking the whole time, but always. So, and then, suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I can communicate with him. So maybe I should try. So I explained to him why I was taking Oliver out without him and how long I would be. And the first time I did it, he didn't bark the whole time. And it's like every now and again you have these moments of, oh yeah, it is real.
Yeah, the aha moments.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, sure.
And so, I mean, this is natural to you. So I guess you don't think of it as, being an animal communicator as a career. It's like it's just part of your everyday life. So what were your ideas, when you were in college, about career and working and that sort of thing? Did you combine it with thinking about animals, or?
Well, in all honesty, when I first went into college, my first semester, I was majoring in animal management, and I had wanted to either have like my own pet store or manage a boarding facility. Or I know, like, growing up, I wanted to be an animal psychiatrist. And that was not something that was that was like not anything that was even imagined, or like, I don't know I'm sure to some extent it existed. And of course now it would be an animal behaviorist, is I think the type, what they go by now. But so my first semester, sorry, this is Bella.
Hi, Bella.
My first semester in college, I found out it was a lot of biology, and science and I aren't very good together. I don't do really well in classrooms with science. So I realized that was going to be too difficult. So I did not. I left that degree, and I just actually went for general, not knowing what I was going to do. So I mean, yes, growing up, I wanted to do some angle of working with animals. I didn't know what angle it would be. Vet school was out for me just because I'm not really good with blood also, so I couldn't imagine doing something like that.
No. Quite a lot of blood in that line of work.
And a lot of biology and things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, it really, I at first, as a child, I worked at a boarding facility. But that was, when I was a teenager, and my first jobs. And learned a lot, and had a lot of fun, and it was definitely hard work because that was cleaning the kennels and walking all the dogs and all of that. So that was a lot of hard work, but we had a lot of fun with it. And then yeah, I mean, then as an adult or into like real careers, I didn't go that way. I think I just went towards what I could do easily, or not easily, but just what I was able to get into. So I actually, I mean, did a couple odd jobs, but then ended up in the career of insurance. Became an insurance broker, so selling insurance and working with clients, employers, working with them to, find insurance. Here in America, we have insurance that's individual. It's done differently, I think, than the majority of the world. But so I was shopping insurance for my clients. It was a lot of numbers, a lot of spreadsheets, explaining insurance. I, in a way, really enjoyed it because I liked working with the employees and helping them when things, came up. So I enjoyed that side of it, the, helping people and nurturing kind of a thing in a way. Got to know my clients. I was in that industry for a long time, so I got to know my clients really well, got to know their needs. And so I enjoyed that part. The business side of it, quite literally just drained my soul. I mean, it was good money, but that wasn't what mattered. It was just scary to leave the industry because I didn't know what else I would go into. It was all I knew. And this was going into my 40s at this point, actually. It was all I knew. And of course, the thought of leaving it and leaving the money, even though I was never money driven, at this point, I had my own house. I had expenses that fit what I was making. So it was really scary, but I got to a point where I couldn't eat. My friends were telling me like I wasn't myself anymore. I just was angry all the time and just, it wasn't me anymore. I just literally, my soul and my everything was drained. So I got to a point where I was just like, okay, I need to leave. I need to leave this industry and I need to just figure out what I'm going to do. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, I just one day came into work and I was like, this is the day. And then for a year, I was unemployed. Well, specifically, it was like 9 months. So it wasn't a full year. Sorry. But it was, it felt like a year.
Long enough.
Yeah. And it was hard. I mean, when I first left the industry of insurance, because that was all I really knew, that was who I was. I spent the first 24 hours, I can remember this so clear, other than walking my dogs, I spent the first 24 hours just on my couch, just in a daze. Like I couldn't comprehend anything. Like I just sat there, no music, no TV, nothing on. I just sat there just in a daze. And I think if I didn't have to go out to walk the dogs, I would have sat there for that whole time. And then, and then I just had to start figuring out, like, what did I want to do? I did for a little bit look into starting a business of doing animal communications. But because I had never officially done it, it was just so scary that I never really got into it. I did a couple readings for free, just as kind of practice from people I didn't know. But it just was really scary. And I just didn't have, even though I knew I should have had the confidence, like I had the proof behind me, I just never had that confidence. So I just couldn't get myself really into it. So through the person who I spoke about earlier, she got me a part-time position at a dog groomers. And so I started doing that. And so I was able to be around the dogs. And at this groomers, they had all the dogs loose and just wandering around until it was like their time to get groomed. And then, so even though I was like the front desk person, making the reservations, taking payments, all that stuff, the dogs were coming in and out of my office.
Nice.
And at that point, I had just gotten a new dog who was the one that was, the diabetic, Layla. So she came to work with me. Just because of timing, I needed to do her insulin while I'd be at work. luckily she was able to come to work with me. Then she played all day with the with the dog. It was a great situation.
Yeah.
So I did that for a short time. During that time, a friend of mine worked at a animal shelter, and she kept telling me, she had been telling me for a while, she was like, you really should work here, you should work here, it's perfect for you, like it really fits in. And I had all those negative images, all those images people talk about. And so I was just like, there's no way I can go into an animal shelter while I'm hearing their thoughts and their emotions. Like, there's no way I could ever do that. And so she just kept telling me, she's like, it's not like that. Like, it really isn't. And she's someone who understood and actually had used my, I don't want to say services, but like my
Your abilities, yeah.
Yeah. So she knew that this wasn't something I was making up in my head. And so I was like, all right, I'll apply, I'll see. So I ended up getting a position, and started first as a, they're, sorry, the department is called admissions, but it's like the intake area. So I started as a coordinator for admissions. And at the time I started, we pretty much took every pet in. I mean, we had regulations. We're a private small shelter, so we did have regulations. We don't take every pet in. We're not connected with animal control. But we took in, we weren't necessarily at that time trying to encourage people to keep their pet or help them find ways to keep their pet. If they called us looking to surrender and that pet fit to be able to come in, we went ahead and scheduled it. So I was in that position for about a year. And at that point, my manager left and I was hired into her position. So now I've been a manager for the admissions department for 8 years. So, and in that time, we have now kind of switched more, and this is, you're seeing this across the board, at least here in America. I can't speak for other countries, but I think it's kind of something that's going across the board, across the world at this point, is retention and trying to get, or trying to find ways to help people keep their pets. So when someone calls, you know, we talk to them about, you know, have you tried looking for rescues? Have you tried reaching out to coworkers? You know, if you belong to a church or a synagogue or any type of club or anything like that, have you reached out to the people there? Have you used social media? Sometimes it's a situation where it's just going to be like a matter of a month or two, and the people really just need long-term foster, where they just need a situation for a long time. So it's, you know, we see if, you know, if we give you a crate, are you able, would that help you if you had your pet, you know, crated somewhere, if you're staying with someone who doesn't necessarily want a dog walking around their whole house, if you crate and you crate the dog except for when you're home and keep them to your room or something like that, which is still better than having to separate your pet from you and you from your pet. So the goal has really changed to trying to keep families together, and families including the pet, because that's part of your family.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think in general, one of the biggest things I have learned about working at a shelter, and something I've really pushed with my team and really have been pushing in general with everyone at the shelter, but also just trying to get it out, the word out there, is realizing that all of us, you know, you get a pet, and at the time you get a pet, you're not thinking, oh, in a year, 2 years, I'm going to have something happen where I'm not going to be able to keep this pet anymore. You don't go to it with that intention. And a lot of people we find, you know, they find a pet on the street and they take it in, but then they realize they really can't afford it, or they didn't know it had this major health issue, or a major health issue comes up. So they tried to help the pet in this situation and then realized they couldn't help the pet. So well, growing up, we're taught, shelters are bad. The people who bring the pets to the shelter, they're just dumping the pet, and they're horrible people. But that's just not true. We don't know what's going on. And so even when people are, leaving a pet in a carrier or leaving a dog, tied to a gate, we realize that, or we have to stop and appreciate the fact the person took the time to get the pet to a place they know is going to be safe. They might have, we don't know what was going on with them. They might have been in the middle of an emergency and they just had to get their pet safe and rush, to a hospital, rush out of state. They might have had an emergency happening with a family member in another state. We've had people who have had to leave the country to go take care of a parent in another country. There's so many emergencies that can happen that hopefully we never have to deal with. So we're probably not even thinking about them. But there are so many emergencies. But then also it's because we put so much judgment on people, and make them these evil people if they take their pet to the shelter. A lot of times people are ashamed to be doing it. So they want to get their pet somewhere safe. They're going to leave their pet on that property of a safe place where they know the pet's going to be taken care of. But they're too embarrassed, too shamed to actually walk into the shelter, make an appointment, or talk to someone, because they're so convinced that they're going to be shamed or yelled at, or made to feel bad when they're already in some situation where they're not feeling great. So it's really, we don't know the story. Even if they're telling us something, we don't really know what's behind the story. I think of it kind of like, when you see someone and you say, "Oh, how are you doing?" And so many times we just answer, if someone asks us, we just answer, "Oh, we're fine."
Yeah.
Because we really don't want to go into everything. Like, we don't want to stir it up for ourselves, but also we don't really go into everything. We might, if the person knows that, I don't know, that we were just going through something, we might comment on that one thing, but we're not going to tell them everything else that's going on. So it's kind of that same thing. And it's hard because I think it's natural as humans to want to make that story in our head. But that's the key, is that it is a story that we ourselves are making in our head. We'll have a stray pet that'll get found and brought to us, and the finder will say, it might be a stray pet who, their fur is really dirty, might be matted, they look skinny, and the finder will be like, whatever you do, you cannot give this back to the owner, or you have to have animal control report to the something, because they make it the owner who had this happen to this pet must be horrible, must be evil. Like, how dare they let their dog become dirty and skinny and all this stuff. But bottom line is, we don't know how long that pet was missing for. A dog can become dirty within minutes. I mean, anyone who has a yard and a dog knows that it does not take long for a dog to get dirty.
No.
We don't think there's a health issue with that dog. So there might be a health issue as to why the dog is skinny. A lot of us have our own opinions of what skinny is and not. I mean, we had people who bring in a dog and they're like, "Oh my God, look how skinny it is." And it's like, for us, at least for where I live, what a lot of people consider skinny is actually the healthy weight for the dog. A lot of times we overfeed our dogs. So to us, what looks good is actually not healthy. So it's really important to kind of stop and look at all the different scenarios it could be, and not getting caught up in our own thoughts of, oh, it must be this, it must be that. I've gotten to the point now where, if I'm reading something on social media and they're like, someone says, "Oh, I adopted this new dog. It was just dumped at the shelter." With making a comment like a pet was dumped, you're just demonizing the person and demonizing the situation and demonizing a shelter. So you're really helping no one, because we want people to know that if they have a problem, that the shelters are there to help them. So it's important that we're not making this an evil place or making the people evil for reaching out when they need help. It's looking at all the different situations and the different scenarios. The majority of the people in this world, if they were to lose their job, how long can they financially survive until they get another income? And so you don't always know that you're going to lose your job. Or there can also be other things that come up. Also, we don't know always if there's going to be an emergency that happens medically. It could be a health concern that comes up. It could be an accident that happens. There's so many things that can happen that, of course, are not planned. But if they keep us out of work for a long time, and we're not getting paid while we're out of work, or if the insurance doesn't fully cover something and we have to pay for that, that can put us in a situation where we can't afford to care for a pet anymore. So a lot of times it's the person trying to find what's best for the pet, as difficult as it is. And, you know, we find people sometimes they come in and they want to be, you know, they don't want to show us how upset they are. And or they just also are just, they've separated themselves from the situation. They know they have to get through it, and they've just separated themselves from their emotions. But I've seen so many people as they're walking out our door and walking to, it's a long driveway or walkway to the cars then, or to the parking lot. You can see from the back of them, because you can see how they're shaking. They just break down. But they were able to keep their strength to do what they needed to do. And then they just lose it. Or a lot of times people, you know, act angry towards us as they're surrendering their pet, because we're a safe person. We're not their family, we're not their friends. So their frustration or their anger on a situation is being put out on us. And I always try and remind my staff, like, you have to find a way to separate from that, because it's not personal, it's not at you. You're just a safe person. Unfortunately, my staff usually understands that, and it's not something that happens often. It's just, you know, sometimes if, you know, someone's been evicted from their home and they have nowhere to go, and, you know, they've maybe slept in their car for a few nights, but they're like, I can't do this, it's not fair for my pet. And they're just at their end. They just don't know what else to do. And they're bringing their pet, and it's the last thing they want to do, but they know it's not fair to the pet. You know, maybe the temperatures are about to drop and get really cold, and it's just, you know, it's heartbreaking. But it's not this evil story that so many of us have been brought up hearing, and so now we think that that's what it is. It's, you know, and at least, you know, I can speak for my shelter. We make sure that the pets get what they need. I mean, of course, every shelter is feeding them and giving them shelter and everything, and, you know, but we have a lot of volunteers. So besides just the staff walks, they get volunteer walks. And by the end of the day, on days that I close the shelter, because managers take turns on who opens and who closes, part of the process of closing is walking through, making sure every window and every door is locked. So of course you're walking through all the pets in the shelter. And I mean, they're just like sprawled out, passed out. They're so exhausted after all the walks they're getting. And then we also give them mental stimulation through games and things. Dogs who might need more exercise than other dogs, or who might be stressed, we feed them through work to eat toys instead of in a bowl. They have to use their brain to figure out a puzzle in order to eat, kind of a thing. So that takes a little bit longer. So we do everything we can to fulfill their needs. It's still a shelter. There's no way around that. I mean, there's no way around that. But we also have foster homes. So we have, it's volunteers who agree to foster the pet in their home for whatever the time frame is. Sometimes we might get a stray pet in and we just want some more information. We see something that might be concerning and we want to see, is it just the stress of being in a shelter, or is this really who the pet is? So we'll have foster parents who will take them in for a couple weeks, get to know them. And then we get more information that helps us find a good match for an adopter. Sometimes we might just have a pet who has been with us for a long time. We don't euthanize for time or space. So if they're not getting adopted, or if they're going through a lot of medical stuff, they might be with us for a while. So we send them to foster, so they're not just in the shelter the whole time, because that's just a lot of stress for the pet that they don't need to go through. Some pets just don't do well at all at the shelter, so we have them in foster until they get adopted, and that can be months. And then sometimes we look for rescues. If it's a pet we don't feel like we can adopt out, for many different reasons. It might be a health issue that we just can't treat properly in the shelter. It might be that it's just a pet who is so stressed at the shelter that even with foster care, because it might take us a little time to find foster care, we'll look for rescue, which sometimes we can get them out quicker. We actually have a pair of bonded dogs who had been in foster for about 4 months, and we kept getting applications. For whatever reason, they kept falling through. We think it's because to us, if they're bonded, we're going to keep them bonded. We're not separating them. And so we think that that's why, people kept thinking, oh, I'll take this one, but not this one, because one was a 9-year-old and one was a 3-year-old. And we would have to say no. So we finally agreed, let's just look for rescue, because rescue might have more options out there. And right away, we were able to find a rescue who, agreed to keep them together. And so the other day they were able to leave for rescue.
Is rescue like foster?
Yes. So rescues are, there's a lot of different rescues. Some of them specialize in specific breeds. Some of them are all breeds. Some of them are cats, some are dogs. And every rescue is run differently. They're run by volunteers, and no connection or affiliation with us. They're all their own entities, become nonprofits, at least here in the States. I can't speak for other countries, even though I know that there's rescues in other countries. But they, the rescues we work with, they have their pets fostered in homes. So they're not in kennels. And then they take over at that point, like any medical expenses or anything like that. But then they also try to find adopters. And sometimes rescues will have like events where they'll have pets at them, and which gets more exposure. So yeah, it's just like another venue. And they just have, some people are afraid to, I don't want to say afraid, but because of the image of a shelter, some people won't come to a shelter because they just think it's going to be too difficult, which I can fully understand, but too difficult to see a pet in the shelter. So they only go to rescues. And also sometimes rescues just have more resources than a shelter does, because depending on the shelter depends on where they're getting their finances from.
So where do you get your finances from?
For our shelter, donations. Some shelters have, well, I should say for us, donations and grants. Sorry, other shelters run with donations and might get money from the government, depending on if they're connected with like animal control, things like that. Some shelters are run through the government. Yeah, for us, we're private. We're nonprofit, which means they get a tax break. People get tax breaks if they donate to us.
Okay. So you work in admissions, but are you involved in the adoption side as well?
I'm not directly involved as a manager. I just, I cover as needed over there. But also for us as a shelter, being that we're small, all the managers meet weekly for the different departments. So if any processes are being changed or anything's going on, we all discuss them, even though we're not having the final say for different departments. So have a familiarity with all the different departments.
Mhm.
So for adoptions, and again, it's, you know, it's going to be different in every place.
Mm.
But for us, for adoptions, it's a little different. It's been a little different because of COVID, but we're about to reopen. So I'll talk about how it always was pre-COVID and how it's about to become again.
Mm.
But people would come in, if they're looking for a cat, they would come in, let us know they're looking for a cat. And then they're able to go into the cat room and look at the different cats, see who they're interested in. And then we would have them go into a room. We have two small rooms that are called the get acquainted room. And so they'll go into one of those to be able to spend some time with the cat that they're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And then same with the dogs. If there's a dog they're interested in. Now for the dogs, we have them meet outside. Obviously, we can't do that with the cats, but for the dogs, we have to meet outside. If it's not good weather, we have a larger get acquainted room for the dogs. But we prefer people to be able to be outside with the dogs. See how the dog is outside. And then we have fun runs that are areas that are closed off, and we can let the person actually handle the dog in there. The reason we have it there is because, you know, we don't know the people, we don't know their training at that point. We don't want them to accidentally lose the dog, kind of a thing. So if everything goes well, they're interested in the pet, they will then talk to an adoptions counselor. And at that time, we go through everything. We are transparent. So we tell them, so when someone surrenders a pet, even if it's just a stray pet, we go through a bunch of questions. We ask to try and find out everything they know about the pet. And the reason for that is to find the best match on the adoption side. And also help the new person know what is going to make that transition as easy as possible for that pet. So the adoptions counselors go through that. They go through any notes that we've had on the pet while the pet's been with us. So if we've had issues with, you know, while the pet's walking, it might chew on the leash a lot, or it might be a pet who is afraid to come back into the shelter, which we don't know if that's just, is that a dog who just doesn't want to come inside, or is it because of the shelter and it smells kind of like a vet's office? So it's that whole thing. So we'll have notes about that. Notes about, you know, this dog might be a dog who jumps up on you a lot. Here's the, you know, here's how we've been working with the pet, the dog or cat, you know, to help with whatever concerns we've had that have arisen. With cats, you get cats who sometimes get overstimulated, so you have to be careful petting them, like 2 pets and that's it, or they're going to bite you.
Sounds like Maya.
Right? It could be also something where, you know, and this could come from the original owner's notes, or something we've discovered. They're allergic to turkey, so you can't, you know, you have to make sure that whatever food they're eating doesn't have turkey in them or something. I mean, I'm just using that as an example. Or they gulp, so you don't want to use a regular bowl for them, or they're going to gulp and it's going to cause other issues, or they're just going to throw right up because they've gulped all the food. So we give all the information we can. Medical, we do a lot of medical. Anything that we're able to do that looks like it's going to be a positive outcome for the pet. So if a surgery is going to be a surgery to, you know, help the pet for a month, but that month the pet's going to be suffering, we're not going to put the pet through that, and we will opt to euthanize. If it's if, you know, if the pet has a poor prognosis, we're not going to make the pet suffer. So we euthanize for that. But if there's any medical we've gone through, and we do a lot of medical for pets, we give them all of that. So the adoption counselor goes through all of that with the potential adopter. If the adopter agrees with that and we feel like it's a good fit, then we move forward and they're able to do a contract. For us as a shelter, we're not able to go to the homes to do a home visit. Rescues, a lot of rescues do home visits. They'll actually go to the person's home and look at it, and they might have different rescues run differently. some rescues insist on you having a fenced-in yard.
Mm.
Some aren't concerned one way or the other with that. But we as a shelter, we don't have the staffing, we don't have the ability, the resources to go and do a home visit for everyone.
Mm. Is it hard not knowing exactly where the animals are going to?
Sometimes it is, just because you get so attached to them. So I think it's more a matter of not being able to have that connection anymore with the pet.
Mm-hmm.
But you always have to like just trust that they're going to a good place. We do reach out to them and try and keep in touch with them. One thing I have learned from the time I've been there is, again, with that judgment, you can't judge how you think someone's going to treat a pet. So we might have someone who comes in and they're really short with us, or not really pleasant with us, but that has nothing to do with how they're going to treat a pet. And so, sometimes we'll have staff that'll come up to us and say, he was really short with me, I don't think we should adopt. And it's like, okay, but how does that connect with how they're going to treat a pet? I know for myself, I would much rather stay home with my 2 babies than be out in the public, especially if I'm in a bad mood. And maybe that person's going through a lot and they're realizing that they need a companion at home. And so they're just really having a hard time right now being, out around people, but they need a companion, and that's going to help them being able to soften up. So that's difficult. But, I've also seen where, people, they might seem, when they come in, they might seem rough around the edges. Or it might, they're not coming in wearing pearls and showing that they have all this money. That doesn't mean that they're not going to do everything they can to make sure that pet gets what they need. And even people who have, lots of money, it doesn't mean that they're going to make sure that pet has everything they need, or that they're not going to harm the pet. So you can't judge by how the person looks, or how you think the person lived, where the person lives, any of that, because that really doesn't compute into how that pet is going to be treated. And that's another thing where, it's the judgment can come in so many different angles. So it is something that just kind of really it covers the entire part of sheltering. You have to walk through looking at the pets. If they make a comment, like with one of the dogs, that makes it sound like they're gonna, they're looking for a dog to fight or something like that. I mean, of course, that's not happening.
No.
But if they say, people with cats, sometimes they're looking for mousers. They're looking for a cat to help them with mice. But they don't really understand that not all cats are going to do that. So then it just becomes a time to educate and a time to talk to them about, okay, so what is your plan if this cat doesn't want to chase mice? What is your plan if the cat becomes friends with the mice? Like, what are you going to do? And have you thought of the fact that sometimes mice are getting poisoned, especially if you're in an apartment? A different apartment might have poison for the cat or for the mouse. The mouse comes into your apartment and then your cat gets it, and now you've poisoned your cat too. So kind of having that full conversation, letting people think about that. I know for us, we want people to be getting pets as a companion, not as a mouser or something like that. I mean, we're looking for companion pets, part of the family. But people haven't really always thought about that. They just, the growing up, again, it comes to the stories of growing up. We're told that cats and mice don't get along. There are cats and mice who live together, or so it's not a guarantee. And so it does come to having the people think out. So what are they gonna? What is the plan? and oftentimes you find people saying, you know, oh, no, I mean, I want the cat for myself, but I also like I've had mice before, so I think that'll help. Like, you know, growing up, I know that like we had a cat and it kept the mice away. So you find that like people just stick to one piece of something, and they don't necessarily share you the whole story unless you sit and have a conversation with them. And so it's not always really what the person first says. So yeah, I'm sorry. So to answer your question of is it hard to, yes, it is hard not knowing necessarily where they're going, but it's more just wanting to stay in their lives, wanting to still be a part of their life, kind of a thing.
So did you, you know, when you first started there, did you have you had to learn to, you know, be open and not judge people, or did that come naturally to you and then you have taught or you've guided the other staff that way?
I think a big thing that helped me is that piece of communicating with pets, because when they came in, I had more of the story than what we were being told. So that helped. I'm not going to say I'm perfect. I still put judgment out there. I mean, and I have told my staff, if you ever hear me judging, stop me, because the same as what I'm going to do for you, we need to like teach each other. It's a relearning kind of a thing. And I find myself, you know, I'll be doing really great at like being able to keep to the facts and not judge, and keep realistically like looking, okay, we know the pet's safe and that's really what matters now. 2 times in my life where just life in general is difficult, and then I become more, you know, judgmental in that. But when I first started, I really would be able to get the fuller story, and so I was able to see more how difficult it was with the person or the situation. We had somewhere within the first year that I was there, I can't remember exactly how long I had been there, but we had a dog who someone let loose on our property. It's a gated property, or not gated, it's a fenced-in property other than the driveway. But still not the ideal to have a loose dog, because you don't know how the dog is, you don't know, you know, anything like that. So, you know, we were able to get the dog in. If I remember correctly, it wasn't hard to get the dog. Sometimes they're scared and it takes a while to catch a dog, but this dog came pretty easily. We didn't know anything about this dog. We didn't know what was going on. The dog had a microchip, so we were able to at least get a phone number, but we couldn't get through to the person. And I was able to get the story that the owner was on the way to the hospital, was in a panic, and left the dog with us because he didn't know what else to do. It might not have been the way that we wished he had done it, but how it had happened. So of course everyone's, you know, in the, you know, how horrible this person was, because he just let the dog loose, and anything could have happened to this dog. And what if the dog got off of our property and ended up in the street? Or, you know, what if, so many what ifs, you know, you can on and on and on, and just add to the story that's in our own brain that we're making up. So everyone had this, like, this man is horrible. You know, if we do find him, we can't give this dog back. He abandoned the dog. How horrible of him, all this stuff. And then, you know, and as I said, I had the message from him about his person needing to go to a hospital, and it was emergency. And so he let the dog loose and went. So I did tell my manager, I was like, this is what I got. My manager knew about my ability. So although she wasn't sure if she was believing it, she knew why I was coming to her with this. It didn't help us with knowing who the owner was, but at least we had that piece. So I don't know, a few days later, we start getting calls from neighbors telling us, hey, our neighbor's in the hospital. I think he brought the dog to you. So we were able to piece it together. And then my manager was able to see, like, oh, okay, you had actual information. But because of this, we ended up being like, okay, we're going to hold on to this dog and figure out what's going on. And at the end, we were able to reunite,
Mm,
reunite them.
nice.
But it's that we're so quick to make these stories up in our head and think about how evil this person is, and how he must not care, and he just, he's just this horrible person, and there's no reason that anyone should, um, and it's just, I don't know if it's we do this to try and make ourselves feel better, um, or what the reasoning is, that it's just this like natural thing that humans do, but it doesn't help the situation at all. It didn't do anything to help the dog. I mean, there was no piece of our story that helps anything out with the dog. It doesn't help the person. It might not have been that he did the ideal thing. I mean, yes, we would have loved for him to have come to us and talked to us and given us information about the dog. But we don't know the details of what. We just know that he had an emergency. He was going to the hospital. We don't know the details. It was early in the morning, so maybe he tried to come to the door and we weren't there yet because we were still getting things set up and organized. And he just panicked because he had to go right at that moment. But again, he made sure the pet was somewhere safe. I mean, it was loose on the property, things could have happened, but his thought process in that emergency situation was, dog at a place where people care about dogs.
Yeah.
At least he's safe. I can now know that he's safe and go on. So, and with the collected information that we got from the neighbors, and then once we were able to get in touch with him, we were able to release the dog, and the dog was able to then stay with the family instead of having to be rehomed.
So can you see, I'm just backtracking a little bit now, can you see the years that you were in insurance? Was there something that you learned or experienced in that time that has helped you while you've been, in your work at the shelter? I wonder if your ability to see or to be open to the idea that, these people are coming from anywhere and everywhere and have, all sorts of different experiences and challenges, maybe that came from meeting so many people in their, well, you were getting insurance for them or they were doing insurance claims. So yeah, just wondered.
Actually, yeah, that probably did, because I dealt with, the owners of the business or the HR of the business, but then I did, I did meet and help all the employees as they needed. And so that was a lot of different people from different backgrounds. So that could have helped me. I've never really thought about it that way, but that really could have, because I got to know people from so many backgrounds, so many different types of careers and jobs, and at so many different, what we would call levels, I guess, dealing with like the owner, and everyone who is working at a company and making a company survive. So yeah, probably because I wasn't coming in, never working with someone who was like the president of a company, or never working with someone who was the janitor of a company, or a manager of a company or something like that. I had been working for so many years with so many people of different types of backgrounds, so I'm sure that did help me.
Yeah,
because it was something that was just natural to me.
Lots of different stories. Yeah, so yeah, it's like it opens up your perspective, because we only know our own story and our own experiences, and we might feel like we're being open-minded, but a lot of people forget that there's nearly 8 billion people on the planet, and every single one has had a different experience of life. And and
pretty much if you talk to just about anyone, you're going to find that there's some kind of similarity somewhere in there, or you have some kind of connection. It's just finding it and having both people open taking that moment. I think we're taught so much, like, don't talk to strangers. That person's different than you, so no need to like interact with them. And I just think that that's such a harmful thing for us. I mean, it does nothing other than harm us. So it's, yeah.
And I was just thinking that, why are we so quick to judge other people? And I think it's partly we judge them the way that we would judge ourselves if we did that thing. And the person we're always hardest on is ourselves. So I guess if we have a judgment of other people, it's inadvertently actually us judging ourselves and not giving ourselves a break. But if people could just forgive themselves for not knowing better, for not doing better, and reminding ourselves that we're always doing our best, that there would actually be a like a wave of relief across the planet. And
it is okay. It is okay I made that mistake, or
yes,
it is okay that was the decision I made, or
So I mean, I don't know, but I wonder if it's something about not forgiving ourselves for not meeting our own expectations. And I know I have way too high expectations of myself. Well, probably not these days. I'm much more realistic, but I definitely used to have high expectations, and of course I project those onto other people when not even I could meet them.
No, exactly. I think that is like definitely where a lot of it comes from.
But I love that you're through the your childhood and what came natural to you, and then the was it 20 years in insurance or something like that, that it's like these two things come together and not only support the animals that you're helping at the shelter and not only helping the people, but actually upgrading, like moving the whole sort of the whole scenario about being having to what was the word you said before? Surrender. Having to surrender an animal or sort of adopting an animal. It's like just raising that whole understanding of people. So I think it's beautiful. It's you've come together very well. I'm very happy with that. I think it's brilliant.
It's learning a lot from a lot of different people. And honestly, I've learned a lot from my boss, who, she's the operations director, directs, all the operations part for the shelter. But they're very much you really have to stop and look at the whole situation and don't just rush into everything. Pause and like step back and look at it. And I still have so much to learn from them, but I have learned a lot from them, and just the way that they're able to see, see things. But between, my past, I guess, information that I've learned and just working with people, working with pets, and seeing how everyone can be different but still is the same kind of thing, and all of that. It just somehow comes together, and I feel it's just really important, not just in the sheltering world, but just in life for everyone. I mean, I feel like everyone can take that, take a piece of it, and
absolutely.
Just walking down the street and you see someone, and what's our natural thing but to judge them, whether we're judging them of being like, oh, I wish I had their life. We don't know anything about their life. We just know how they look, and we've made that assumption that they have this amazing life. To, oh my God, that person looks scary. I'm crossing the street, so I don't have to walk past them. When they might be the person who, if we took the time, would be like our best friend and the person we thought was the most amazing person in the world. But we don't give them that time. We make that judgment, that quick judgment, and I think that's something that all of us could do better at.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, that's a piece that I think, if we could all, learn to put that into our lives, which I think is so hard because it's not how we're raised as a society. It's not how we're raised. It's nothing has to do with our parents. It's just a society. So it's, it just, I think, goes into any aspect of any work you're doing.
It's relating to people, isn't it? It's basically relating to people.
Yeah.
I think, when we talked about, doing this, having this conversation, my thought was a lot around, I can imagine so many people would struggle to go to a shelter, even just to look for an animal, because they would feel they wouldn't be able to cope with the emotion that that they would be worried they would feel, let alone actually going and working in a shelter, which, as you said, that was your first reaction. So yeah, I wonder what happened in relation to your emotions when you started to work there?
I think because I saw how much we were doing for the pets in our care, I guess it made it easier. Being in the admissions department, the intake part of it, I always felt like that was just so difficult because that initial moment that the pet knows that it's being left, that, I mean, even just thinking about it makes me kind of tear up. But
yeah, but I felt it when you said that. I just got this in my chest.
Yeah.
So yeah,
those are difficult moments. But we do have we have pets who sometimes get returned for many different reasons. It might just not be a good fit. Allergies, it's so many different things. But the pets who return shortly after they were adopted, and so they still are very familiar with us, they're excited when they see us because, oh, you're the person who would walk me and play with me, kind of a thing. You still get the pets who are scared to come in because it smells like a vet's office, but
is that what they tell you? Is that what they relay to you? That
you know what, I've never actually asked, but that's always what I've said. So probably that's the sense I've got.
You're picking it up.
Yeah. But there are still days where luckily with my position, I don't have a need to necessarily walk through every day and see the pets. Technically, I probably should because I have to look at spacing and stuff. But there are certain days where I just emotionally I can't go through. And so I find other ways to get to other departments if I need to. But I think when I first started, I was probably so overwhelmed. I'm trying to remember back. Probably so overwhelmed with just trying to remember things. And even though we're a small shelter, it still was like a maze.
Yeah.
So I was so in that mindset that I didn't really have I wasn't necessarily spending time with any of the pets yet at that point. I had to go through training to be able to, go into a kennel with one of the dogs, or take a dog for a walk, or spend time with the cats. We go, everyone goes through training before they can handle any of the pets with us. So, so I don't remember how initially I was. I know there have been times, depending on what pets were there, and I've had pets who will be communicating to me even when I'm home, and I'm just like, this isn't okay. So I have had to kind of close that part of me when I'm at work so that I can work. It doesn't always work. I mean, sometimes their voices are louder than I can turn off, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Because they're like people. Yeah, animals.
Well,
There's some they're really loud and want to just talk and talk and talk, and then the other really quiet ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And there have been, I mean, there have been times where they've told me things, and so I share them. I mean, I find a way to share them, and
Mm.
unfortunately I can't. It's not like just one person saying something is going to change the way we're
Mm.
doing any kind of activities with that pet. But I do try, if they're telling me something, I do try to share that to at least see if I can find a way for us to alter something that we're doing.
Mm.
Um, like when a bonded pair of pets come in, we
Mm.
can't keep them together until they're altered, spayed, neutered, because we can't take the chance of them
Yeah.
um, having babies.
Mm.
So if they haven't had surgery yet, we can't keep them together. And then of course,
Mm.
if they've had surgery, they have to stay apart just so they don't hurt themselves.
Mm.
Um, so there's been times where I've had to, one of the pets to a bonded pair have been speaking to me and saying
Mm.
how they're having, they don't understand why they can't be with their sibling, or why, they
Mm.
need to be with their sibling. They're really scared, that, whatever. Um, so I'm able to say, we need to make sure that we're walking them together.
Mm.
At least they have that together. Can we put them on cages apart, or in front of each other so they can see each other
Mm.
instead of just next to each other where they can smell each other?
Mm.
Um, so like things like that, just to try and make them a little bit more comfortable.
Mm.
And if we're able to make those adjustments, that's helpful.
Mm.
Um, but I have had to kind of alter myself in order
Mm.
to continue to work with them. And in my mind, that's helping more pets than if I could communicate with, the
Mm.
few. Um, because oftentimes I do, like when I go through, I do talk to them, whether they're speaking to me or not. I talk to them just out of like, you're safe, you're okay.
Mm.
Everyone is here to make sure that you're getting what you need, and going out for walks. And when you go for a walk, enjoy the smells, and um,
It must
you
be
know,
such a relief for them,
I
to
hope so.
have that, that confirmation that they are safe. And
Yeah,
even just having someone who they recognize, oh, this is a different person, this person's talking to us, like, wow, that
yeah.
must be a real, for a lot of them, that must be quite new to them, to actually have a human listening to them.
Especially in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do
Yeah.
sometimes we get, a dog who's really scared, and will just
Mm.
lay in the back and won't
Mm.
come forward. And so, I'll go into those cages sometimes and just sit at the very front to give them as much space as I can. Um, and I'll just sit there, and I don't look at them because that's a threat to them if you're like going eye to eye.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just be on the side, and I'll just sit there for a little bit, and I'll talk quietly to them, and just spend some time. And if they don't adjust in that time, that's fine. I'll leave. I'll come back a little bit
Mm.
later or the next day. Um, and I try and get it for them to feel safer.
Mm.
Um, Unfortunately, in that time, they're also having to be taken out, and they're scared, but we have to take them out so they can go to the bathroom and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
so it's still a scary environment because you've got all the different dogs barking. They get so excited when they see, first thing in the morning when we come in, they're so excited because they want to go out. And so for a scared dog, even if it's excitement, like it's still just a lot of noise. It's echoing in a room. And so, yeah, I try to use my abilities as much as I can to help them
Mm.
without burning myself out,
Yeah.
because that's not going to help anyone.
Mm-mm.
So it's that really difficult balance that I
Mm.
try and find. So there's, as
Mm.
I said, there's days where I just don't even go around the animals because I can't.
Mm.
And then there's other days. There was actually a dog who I spent time. I would take my laptop. I have a laptop at my desk, so I would take the laptop and just sit in the cage with him and do my work,
Mm.
just so he got used to having someone that he could like eventually get,
Mm.
trust. And it did. I mean, it did work. It ended up being a dog that everyone was able to walk, and he was like,
Mm.
I don't know if that was the only thing that worked. I'm sure it's not. I know other people were spending time, um, We also have an amazing volunteer who comes in and does Reiki with some of the dogs.
Oh,
That
nice.
of course helps.
Yeah.
And that's just coincidence and luck that we have
Mm.
that. And she asked, she must have sensed me, but she asked me, she was like, is it okay if I do this? And I was like, I don't know how anyone else feels, but I see no reason why you couldn't. I think it's going to help. Please do it.
Mm.
um, so she comes in, she walks the dogs, but she, those who need it, she gives it. And um, I think it's wonderful
Mm.
to have that.
Oh, wow. It's amazing. I mean, it's, it's not an easy environment, to think about, but I know that those animals there that come and that go are so blessed to have you there, and the other, the people working there, the other employees and the volunteers, just to that you're rubbing off on them. I think it's fantastic.
All of our staff and volunteers, they're there because they love animals.
Mm.
So even if they don't realize that they're communicating with the pets, and it's the same for any of us who have pets or who are meeting pets, on a walk or going to a friend's house, you meet a pet. When you're talking and you just have that joy, that energy, that is that positive energy, and you're thinking about like how much you just adore this dog or cat, and oh, how much you just wish you could cuddle with this dog or cat. They're seeing that and they're picking that up. So without even meaning to, or without even knowing it, so many of us are communicating with the pets. And I think, like, I see it at our shelter. We have people who just adore all of the dogs or the cats, or and at our shelter we just have dogs and cats. But they are, spending time in the kennels with them, or taking them for a walk, and petting them, hugging them, laying with them. I mean, there's times that you walk by a kennel and there's a person laying in the kennel with a dog. Or sometimes, like, with the cats, a lot of volunteers go in with a book and they just sit with the cat and, are reading a book. Because some of the cats, if it's like an older cat, especially, they might not be as like wanting to play. They just want to lay with you. So all of that is a communication that people, so many of us are communicating without even realizing it. So I think it definitely, at least I can speak for my shelter, and I do feel that it's many shelters across the world are like this, where they're getting that positive communication, even if people aren't realizing it or meaning to. And I think that really helps them. So I mean, it's a difficult environment to walk through. I definitely understand people not being comfortable with that, and looking for other ways to adopt. And a lot of shelters actually do adoptions, have adoption events or things outside of shelters. Of course, there's rescues, but also, I mean, coming in and just seeing the pets and realizing that they are loved, and so many shelters are doing everything they can to try and find a new home for that pet. Instead of the outcome that so many people think or assume is happening to the majority of the pets. So it's not as scary as it maybe once was. But I think it's just going to be time for people to know, and sometimes it's just not the environment for everyone. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you. I didn't really think that much about it until we talked, what it would be like to work in a shelter. I would have instantly said the same thing as, I can't, but you've made me look at the whole shelter scenario so differently. And I'm just, sort of filled with gratitude for people like you who are working in an emotionally challenging environment, but to make the life of these animals better, and in so many ways. It's like you're covering all the bases with them. I just love it. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. We definitely try to do the best that we can for each pet in our care.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for talking with me today and sharing your story and your journey. And I will put the details of how to donate to
Maryland SPCA. Each SPCA is non-affiliated with each other. So if you have an SPCA in your area, it's always great to see if they need donations, because that's part of your community. Although I will also make sure to give you the link for the shelter I work at, for anyone who wants to donate there.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Thank you for watching my conversation with Melissa Engerman. As I said in the beginning, I have posted the website address of the Maryland SPCA if you would like to make a donation, along with the website addresses of Animaltalk Africa and the Global White Lion Protection Trust. If you'd like to support me in this work, I've also included a couple of links below to places where you can donate to this work, and 50% of your donations will go to the Global White Lion Protection Trust. Thank you, and see you next time.